Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to Suomi Torah Weekly Shabbat Discussion. I'm your host, Daniel, and we have John Kalb with us. Each week we read through and examine a portion of the Torah, allowing the Ruach of the Most High to guide, teach, and open our eyes and ears to the law. We are on week 49. Torah portion is KI TETZE, when you go forth, which covers Deuteronomy 21, verse 10 through chapter 25, verse 19. This Torah portion is about polygamy and adultery. Let's begin. Let's start with a word of prayer before we get in. Heavenly Father, we are just so blessed to be here to fellowship with you, to be seeking you on your first day of rest that you made us for us, that we can grow together, that we can grow closer to you. We just ask you that you fill us with your Ruach, your wisdom and understanding, so that we can go out into this world and shine the light, showing our love for one another, being an example that your Son came and lived, so that we may be pleasing in your sight. We are just so blessed for all the things that you provide in our lives, each and every breath that we take. We just ask that we share your message as you see fit, that you speak your words through us today in your Son's name, Yahushua HaMashiach. Amen. Okay, so let's begin with the chapter 21, verse 10. When you go out to fight against your enemies, and Yahweh, your Elohim, shall give them into your hand, and you shall take them captive, and shall be seen among the captive, a woman fair of form, and shall delight in her and take her for your wife. Then you shall bring her home to your house, and she shall shave her head and trim her nails, and put aside the manner of her captivity, and shall dwell in your house, and mourn her father and her mother a month of days. And after that you shall go into her and be her husband, and she shall be your wife. And it shall be, if you are not pleased with her, then you shall let her go at her desire. But you do not sell her at all for silver. Do not treat her harshly, since you have humbled her. When a man has two wives, one loved and the other unloved, and they have borne him children, both the loved and the unloved, and the firstborn son is of her who is unloved. And it shall be, on the day he makes his sons to inherit his possessions, he is not allowed to treat the son of the beloved wife as firstborn in the face of the son of the unloved, who is truly the firstborn. But he is to acknowledge the son of the unloved wife as the firstborn by giving him a double portion of all that he has, for he is the beginning of his strength. The right of the firstborn is his. When a man has a wayward and rebellious son who is not listening to the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and who, when they have disciplined him, does not listen to them, then his father and his mother shall take hold of him and bring him out of the elders of this city to the gate of his city, and shall say to the elders of his city, this son of ours is wayward and rebellious. He is not listening to our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. Then all the men of his city shall stone him to death with stones. Thus you shall purge the evil from your midst, and let all Israel hear and fear. And when a man had committed a sin worthy of death, then he shall be put to death, and you shall hang him on a tree. Let his body not remain overnight on the tree, for you shall certainly bury him the same day. For he who is hanged is a curse of Elohim, so that you do not defile the land which Yahweh, your Elohim, is giving you as an inheritance. Okay.
So, yeah, there's one of the things that sticks out to me, and today we're going to go just a little bit out of the normal circuit here, and we're going to go and read out of the Brit Hadasha, out of Matthew, because a lot of people in today's society, and we've all heard it, I'm sure, that, oh, well, you're Old Testament. You only want to do what the Old Testament says. Well, what's mentioned here is very solidly resounded in the New Testament, and actually given more of a direct understanding, right? So if you want to, Daniel, unless you have something you want to add to this before we go to the Matthew 5 and 19 reading way.
I would like to just comment that I don't think it's allowed in many countries to have multiple wives because it's against the law, and we have to obey the laws of men into a certain limit. For example, we have to set up Asherah poles, and you cannot pray. So those laws I would like to rebuke.
Mm-hmm.
And we should, we should go to the Matthew and then do the rest. Okay.
Right.
So we are reading from the Matthew 5, 31, 32, and English Standard Version. It's about the divorce. So it was also said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give a certificate or a sefer of divorce. But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife except on the ground of sexual immorality makes her commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now let's go to the Matthew 19 passage.
And Pharisees came up to him and tested him by asking, it is lawful to divorce one's wife for any cause. He answered, have you not read that he who created them for the beginning made them male and female, and said, therefore, a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore Elohim has joined together, let not man separate. They said to him, why then did Moses command one to give a certificate of divorce and to send her away? He said to them, because of your hardness of heart, Moses allowed you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning was not so. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery. The disciples said to him, if such is this case of a man with his wife, it is better not to marry. But he said to them, not everyone can receive this saying, but only those to whom it is given. For there are eunuchs who have been so from birth, and there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by men, and there are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Let the one who is able to receive this receive it.
In Matthew 22, 23.
The same day Sadducees came to him, who say that there is no resurrection, and they asked him a question, saying, Teacher, Moses said, if a man dies having no children, his brother must marry the widow and raise up offspring for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers among us. The first married and died, and having no offspring, left his wife to his brother. So too the second and the third, down to the 7th. After them all, the woman died. In the resurrection, therefore, of the 7th, whose wife will she be? For they all had her. But Yeshua answered them, you are wrong, because you know neither the scriptures nor the power of Elohim. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. And as for the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what was said to you by Elohim? I am the Elohim of Abraham. I am the Elohim of Isaac and the Elohim of Jacob. He is not Elohim of the dead, but of the living.
Amen. He is. And I know that one comes in just a little bit later in our Deuteronomy reading, but as we're going through this and looking at these, you know, I just wanted to take care of all the Matthew readings. When we're in Deuteronomy here, chapter 21, and this is a very hard teaching. This is just as he said in Matthew 19, right? Not everyone's going to be able to accept this, and it is a hard teaching to come to that conclusion that once that divorce happens, you know, then where are we at? But I think what we need to do first is define where the marriage ends up coming from. And we see that here in Deuteronomy 21. As he's going through that, you start out, okay, you're going to go fight, and then you find a woman and she's lovely, and you want to take her for your wife, right? Then of course she has to go and trim her nails, weep for or mourn for her father and her mother for 30 days of mourning. And then it says in verse 13, and put aside the mantle of her captivity, and shall dwell in your house, and mourn her father and her mother a month of days. After that, you shall go into her and be her husband, and she shall be your wife. And that is the marital contract right there. The certificate of divorce comes afterward. There's no certificate of marriage. There is here in the United States, where you go and you get the certificate of marriage and you go through all of this stuff for the state, whatever state you're living in. But that's not how it is with Yahweh. The marital contract from the beginning, as we read there in Matthew, was when you went into a woman, that's a blood covenant that begins the marital contract. And so that's in John 4. We won't go and read that today, but Yahushua's speaking to the woman at the well, and he says to her, you've had 5 husbands, and the woman you're with now is not your husband, right? More than likely, the 5th one didn't give her a certificate of divorce yet, but yet she's now with the next man. And in the eyes of Yah, when that sexual act is committed, that is a marital contract. And so I think that's the important aspect of this. And so then when we come back around and we're looking at this divorce issue, which is tough, because now what do we do? Here in Matthew 19, he's saying, wait a minute, verse what is it? Verse 10 here. Well, let's go back up just a little bit. Matthew 19, verse 4, he said, haven't you read that he who created them in the beginning made them male and female, right? It was Adam and Eve in the garden, not Adam and Steve, first and foremost. And he also said, for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. And that's that unification aspect, that sexual act that creates the marriage contract right there. The two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what Yahweh has joined together, man must not separate. So in this modern culture of easy divorce, for whatever reason, and it used to be here in the United States that you almost had to get an act of Congress in your state the senators, or it had to go to that level to get a divorce. And now we have easy divorce, no fault divorce. I'm a result of that. There was no sexual immorality or anything like that. My wife chose to leave because I am now keeping Sabbath. I am now wanting to keep the feast days. I started teaching about this, which she thought I was a false teacher. So she left. No fault divorce. I hated to sign that paperwork, right? Because there was no effort in that. So then how do we proceed? I mean, this is very difficult, because as we go on here, his disciples said to him in verse 10, if the relationship of a man and a wife is like this, it's better not to marry. But he told them, not everyone can accept this saying, but only those it has been given to. But there are eunuchs who are born that way from their mother's womb. There are eunuchs who are made by men, and there are eunuchs who have made themselves that way because of the kingdom of heaven. Let anyone accept this who can. And I'm here to say this is tough to accept, because there's also some teaching out there, and I mean I've listened to some of it, and I'm still struggling my way through it, but basically he's saying if anyone gets a divorce and remarries, they are now committing adultery and not allowed into the kingdom of heaven. And that is a very, again, I can't answer that question all the way, but I think this is difficult for us in this modern world of easy divorce and the idea that we can live however we want to live, because I truly don't want to be alone the rest of my life. I never pictured me being in this position, but I again, we have to put ourselves in this spot that Yah has allowed to happen, and many of us put in the circumstances that we're in due to the choices of other people, right? We don't always get to make the choices of where we want to be, because other people's choices affect us. Is there anything else that you want to add to this, Daniel? Because in the Matthew 5 passage, there's, as he was talking, it's whoever divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But Yahushua says, I tell you, everyone who divorces his wife except for sexual immorality causes her to commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. So now I would have another question. What is this only in the marital contract, or we see much of the New Testament about adultery is where they went after other Elohim, other gods, and they chose to go after other gods. So and that was considered adultery or whoring. They were whoring after other gods. And so does that apply in this instance as well? Where again, I'm going to bring my own circumstance into this. My wife would not accept this because she thought this was failure. And Sherry did just bring up a good point too, that what about the one here who has several wives? You have one loved and one unloved. So how does that work? And I don't have the answer to these questions. I just find it very very interesting that we in this world today are put in this position. Do you have anything you want to add to this, Daniel, or anyone else in the because this is not an easy teaching.
I don't have much about the divorce, but well, if there's nothing else to add, then can we move on to another subject?
Yes, another subject then. Yeah.
Okay.
Because we do want to talk a little bit more about this chapter. I don't mean that we're done with that. So just that.
So back to the verse 18, it says, but when a man has a wayward and rebellious son who is not listening to the voice of his father or the voice of his mother. So basically, what I understood in this verse that it doesn't mean a small child or even a young teen, but a son past the age of accountability, who set himself in determined rebellion against his father and mother. So I don't think it says about 6 years old throwing a tantrum when he or she doesn't get candy from the store, and we drag him to the center of the town to stone him to death. I believe this is speaking of a grown adult person who doesn't do anything else but glutton and gets drunk all day.
I would agree with that. Yeah, if that were the case, and we stoned every rebellious 6-year-old, we wouldn't have any children left, right?
Yeah, and then that would lead us to breaking, the one of those Elohim's laws that multiply.
Right. However, he also says, "Spare the rod and spoil the child." Right. So do we do that? And are we in today's society put in a position where we could actually do that? And did they do that then? Right? How many parents, you realize how difficult that would be to say, oh, wait a minute, I have a child who is not obedient, and he's out drinking all the time, he's doing everything against Yah, he's out sleeping around, he's doing all of those things. How would we, or how did they, either one, handle that situation? Did parents actually bring him forward? Right? Because there seemed to be a lot of issues, with that, even at the time of Yahusha, because what did they do with the woman caught in adultery? Right? They just bring the woman out first and foremost, and they bring her out as an effort to try to belittle or actually to test him to see whether or not he was going to do. Right. And so that's kind of interesting. And of course, the parent here would have to cast the first stone, just as the witness would have to cast the first stone if they said, oh, I saw this person murder somebody. Okay, that's the case, you have to cast the first stone. And I also found it interesting in here that it's the men of the city shall stone the boy, shall stone him. So it's not everyone, but it's the men of the city who are to do this. So
so a couple of examples, we should, but instead of stoning our child, we need to chasten them. Even so, it says in Proverbs 23:13-14, encourages us to discipline our children. Do not withhold discipline from a child. If you punish them with the rod, they will not die. Punish them with the rod and save them from death. And if we continue to Proverbs 13:24, whoever spares the rod hates their children, but the one who loves their children is careful to discipline them. And I bet there are many passages about disciplining your child.
Yes, there are. And there's also passages, I didn't look any up, but there are passages out there about Yah disciplining us, right? That he disciplines those he loves because he wants to bring us into proper relationship with him. And he does that through discipline. So how do we do that? And I actually think even today, there are health issues that we all face. And some of those are a direct consequence of disobedience to Yah. I think multiple times there's different aspects of our life that end up being there. Sometimes it's even harboring anger, right? Or holding on to things that we shouldn't. You know, Yahusha said you can't add a single day to your life by worrying about something. And so I think sometimes when we worry about things, though, we may not add a single day, but we may shorten our days, you know, and then of course some people end up harboring bitterness and anger, and all of those different things affect different aspects of the body.
Mm.
So
I would like to carry on by reading the book of Sirach, chapter 30, verse 12 through 13. So if a son is disciplined, he will not be of some use, and his father can boast of him to his friends. Anyone who gives good guidance to his son cannot only take pride in him among his friends, but he can make his enemies jealous. While the father is alive, the sight of his son makes him happy, and when he dies, he has no regrets. He is not really dead because his son is like him. He has left someone to take vengeance on his enemies and to return the favors he owes his friends. But anyone who spoils his son will have to bandage his wounds. His heart will stop every time he hears a shout. An untamed horse is going to be stubborn, and an undisciplined son is not different. If you pamper your child and play with him, he will be a disappointment and a source of grief. Now laugh with him now, and one day you will have cried over him, grinning your teeth in the regret. Don't give him a freedom while he is young, and don't overlook what he does wrong. Whip him while he is still a child, and make him respect your authority. If you don't, he will be stubborn and disobedient and cause you nothing but sorrow. So discipline your son and give him work to do, or else he will be an embarrassment to you. So here I'm talking about the discipline and correction of a child, not beating your children, but chastening and disciplining your children.
right. Yeah, and there is a difference. I'm glad you brought that up, because there's a difference between beating your child and giving correction.
Right? You know, some people just might overdo it, go over the line. There's a fine, thin line between those.
Right. Right. And typically that happens when you discipline in anger, right? If you're disciplining in anger, that's when you would be more apt to go over the line than if you, okay, wait a minute, there's going to be consequences. I'm going to get myself right first, and then I'm going to discipline you. And I will have to say, there's a couple of times my children push me to the limit, and now they joke about it because, oh yeah, we love to get to the point where the vein in your forehead stuck out. Why would you want to push me that far? But they did because they thought it was funny. You know, it's very interesting that children know how to push buttons and are good at it, right? So
yeah, I
anyway,
remember back in the time when I was young, you know, doing stupid stuff and didn't come home at that wanted time, so I got a beating. It's I think it, and of course the beating happened in front of my brothers. So they would my parents would make me an example that for not disobeying for disobeying the rules of the house. So do you have anything else about the chapter 21?
One other thing, and I guess I thought I read it, and I thought it was in the Matthew portion, but we'll touch on it again, I guess. I think we read about it another thing, but verse 23, and this is very important in the context of Yahusha, right? Because it says, let his body not remain overnight on a tree, for you shall certainly bury the same day. For he who is hanged is accursed of El-Hayim, so that you do not defile the land which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you, you as an giving you as an inheritance. And so when we come to Yahusha and he's hanging on the tree, he gives up his Ruach in the midst of the afternoon. And when they come around, they don't have to break his bones, which also fulfills another passage of scripture. Not a bone would be broken, right? And so this is one of these very important passages that lend itself toward the death, the burial, and the resurrection and the crucifixion of our Messiah, because he did not hang on the tree. He was put on there on the tree in roughly, again, we kind of have our own timelines and stuff, but let's say 9 a.m. until 3 p.m. He gives up his Ruach, and they come around and say, hey, he's dead already. And so they take him down, but the other 2 criminals, they break their legs so that they are also dead, because you suffocate to death hanging there like that. With your legs broken, you can't lift yourself up to breathe. And so he gives up his Ruach, and he tells us that in John 10. I give up my life on my own accord, only to take it back up again. This was given to me by my Father. And so here, to me, that's because the future kingdom is then not defiled. So it's just once again how Yah knew the end from the beginning. And of course, in Revelation 13, it says that Yahusha was slain from the foundation of the world. And so we know that that was one of the things that was going to happen. So with that, that's all I have on this passage, I guess.
One more thing I would like to add to chapter 21. So drinking is not a sin and is often a God-given blessing. However, a scripture's overwhelming testimony is that drinking alcohol can be spiritually dangerous. So in Proverbs 23:21, for the drunkard and the glutton will become to poverty, and slumber will clothe them with rags. So it is not a sin to drink alcohol, but it's a sin to drink it until drunkenness. That's all what I have to say about the chapter 21.
Right. Yeah. Excess. Yeah. It's always that way, right? That's the gluttony. That's the gluttony aspect. So having a drink or two is one thing, but to become a drunkard, right? And even in Timothy, right? In 1 Timothy, where it's laying out the foundation of the elders and the deacons, they're not addicted to much wine, it says. However, it's also spoken of in Timothy that to take a drink of wine for your stomach, for your ailment. See, so you tell me,
So let's carry on to chapter 22.
Right.
When you see your brother's ox or his sheep straying away, you shall not hide yourself from them. Return them to your brother without fail. And if your brother is not near you, or if you do not know him, then you shall bring it to your own house, and it shall be with you until your brother seeks it. Then you shall return it to him. And so you do with his donkey, and so you do with his garment, and so you do with whatever your brother loses, which he has lost, and you have found. You are not allowed to hide yourself. When you see your brother's donkey or his ox fall down on the way, you shall not hide yourself from them. Help him raise them without fail. A woman does not wear that which pertains to a man, nor does a man put on a woman's garments. For whoever does this is an abomination to Yahweh your Elohim. When you come upon a bird's nest along the way, in any tree or on the ground, with young ones or eggs, with the mother sitting on the young or on the eggs, do not take the mother with the young. Let the mother go without fail, and take the young for yourself, so that it might be well with you. and that you shall prolong your days. And when you build a new house, then you shall make a parapet for your roof, so that you do not bring blood guilt on your house when one falls from it. Do not sow your vineyards with different kind of seeds. Let the yield of the seed which you have sown and the fruit of your vineyard be divided. Do not plow with an ox and a donkey together. Do not put on a garment of different kinds of wool and linen together. Make tassels on the four corners of the garment with which you cover yourself. When any man takes a wife, and I shall go into her, and shall hate her, and shall make abusive charges against her, and bring an evil name on her, and say, I took this woman, and when I came to her, I did not find her a maiden. Then the father and the mother of the young woman shall take and bring out of the proof of the girl's maidenhood to the elders of the city at the gate. And the girl's father shall say to the elders, I gave my daughter to this man as wife, and he hates her. And see, he has made abusive charges against her, saying, I did not find your daughters a maiden, and yet these are the proof of my daughter's maidenhood. And they shall spread the garment before the elders of the city, and the elders of that city shall take that man and punish him, and fine him 100 pieces of silver, and give them to the father of the young woman, because he has brought an evil name on the maidens of Israel, and she is to be his wife. He is not allowed to put her away all his days. But if the matter is true, that the girl was not found a maiden, then they shall bring out the girl to the door of her father's house, and the men of her city shall stone her to death with stones, because she has done wickedness in Israel, to whore in her father's house. Thus you shall purge the evil from your midst. When a man is found lying with a woman married to a husband, then both of them shall die, both the man that lay with the woman and the woman. Thus you shall purge the evil from Israel. When a girl who is a maiden is engaged to a husband, and a man finds her in the city and lies with her, then you shall bring them both out to the gate of that city, and shall stone them to death with stones. The girl, because she did not cry out in the city, and the man, because he has humbled his neighbor's wife. Thus you shall purge the evil from your midst. But if a man finds the girl who is engaged in the field, and the man takes hold of her and lies with her, then only the man who lay with her shall die. But you shall do no matter to the girl. The girl has no sin worthy of death for his neighbor and murders. For the matter is like a man who rises against his neighbor and murders him, a being, for he found her in the field, and she cried out, the engaged girl, but without anyone to save her. When a man finds a girl who is maiden, who is not engaged, and he seizes her and lies with her, and they found out, then the man who lay with her shall give to the girl's father 50 pieces of silver, and she is to be his wife, because he has humbled her. He is not allowed to put her away all his days. A man does not take his father's wife, nor uncover his father's skirt. Wow, that was a long chapter about, adultery and being a virgin and a rape.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Oh, there's quite a bit in this passage as well.
Well, we should go down by the line that for example reading about. Well, I got a comment about the mixed seeds or the found and lost. So if I could go with those first.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go.
So when something is lost, in here The examples are the donkey and a garment a finder cannot claim is as their possession without taking proper effort to restore it to the owner. If the owner seeks the missing object, it must be restored to him. So in Exodus 23, verse 4 through 5, also commands Israel to help recover stray animals, but extends the obligations to stray animals of an enemy, not only a brother.
Yes, it does.
And about the mixing seeds, that is generally supposed that mixtures of different sorts in seed, breed, etc., were employed for superstitious purposes and therefore prohibited in this law. And if we go back to the Leviticus 19:19, keep my decrees, do not make different kind of animals, do not plant your feet with two kinds of seed, do not wear clothing woven of two kinds of material. So I think they are talking about linen and wool. So there are some studies saying that linen has a different kind of hertz.
Yeah.
Hopefully you guys catch my drift. So if you can wear the linen on different seasons except for winter, of course, and then you just use the woolen stuff.
Right. So supposedly, and I don't know, yeah, the one has a positive and one a negative. However, when you're speaking about the hertz or the conductivity of it, right? So, and if you're wearing linen and wool together, they basically negate each other. There's nothing left of it, is the way I understand that, and of course, when look at the clothing that we wear today, it's almost impossible. I mean, it isn't impossible, but to find even just pure cotton is they have to blend everything with this polyester or something to that effect, right? You can find true linen shirts and stuff like that. I understand that, but it's, man, how do you find clothing that's not some sort of a mixture anymore? And is it only the linen and the wool would be my other question, right? So we know polyester, since it's made from petroleum, isn't good for you. So sorry, I jumped in there to try to help share that point. Do you have more to add here, or?
Not at this point. Please go ahead.
Okay. So I think along with that then is verse 10, since we're talking about the mixture or whatever, but it says, do not plow with an ox and a donkey. And that would be an unequal mixture, right? So when you're yoking an ox and a donkey, they have a different gait. They're at different heights. And that's why it's saying don't hook those two together, right? If you're going to use an ox or a pair of oxen or a pair of donkeys or horses or work horses, even two horses. If you had, let's say, a quarter horse and a big Belgian or big Frisian workhorse, they can't pull together, right? Because that's the importance of being equally yoked, right? So then that also brings us into the relationship aspect of things, of being equally yoked. We're told that in 1 Corinthians, to be equally yoked with your spouse, right? So that you're pulling together towards a common goal. And unfortunately, we see that when one stays stagnant and the other one is working towards the goal, then just like building muscle, one gets stronger and the other one gets weaker because they're not working together then. So then it's an unequal yoke that way in the relationship. And so I think I find that interesting that that's thrown in this passage. Of course, Yah he's got it all figured out here. That in this passage of again adultery or however you want to tie that the importance of being equally yoked. Then if we drop back to verse 5, a woman does not wear that which pertains to a man, nor does a man put on a woman's garment. For whoever does this is an abomination to Yahweh, our Elohim. Right? So think of that. Think of the society we live in today where you got drag queen story hour and you've got all this stuff going on that are just so it is just an abomination all around. It just unfortunately you see it kind of everywhere. I was out for supper last night in Huron, South Dakota, and these two guys came in. They only were there for a minute or two, and then they left, which I was kind of glad because they were going to come over. I was sitting at the bar and ordered a prime rib. Boy, it was a good prime rib too, but I won't go into my food story. But this guy's carrying a box as a purse and with a big gold chain, and I mean it just made you want to puke. You know, why is society going that way? And here scripture very clearly says a man shouldn't do that, right? If we go to Romans 1, he says, because they've rejected him as the creator, he hands them over to their own evil desires. A man will desire to be with a man and a woman. And this lends itself to that, even just in the garment aspect of it. So one of the other things I find very interesting here is in verse 8, when you build a new house, then you shall make a parapet for your roof, so that you do not bring blood guilt on your house when one falls from it. So basically, what he's saying here is put a railing around it, right? Because the railing will keep people from falling off. And it's kind of an interesting aspect of this. They've done studies, right? And you know, high-rise hotels and apartment buildings and stuff like that. If you have that little 6-foot wide balcony out there, it can be on the 35th floor, right? And so they'll put that balcony there, and they've had people step out on that balcony without a railing, and people cling to the wall because it's, there's nothing there to keep them from falling off. Yet, if you put a railing across it, people will come and lean against the railing and lean over. I just find that so interesting that's the importance of a railing. It's a protection. It gives you protection from falling. And that's what Yah is setting up here, is to make sure you put that on the roof of your house. Also, verse 12, make tassels on the four corners of your garment with which to cover yourself. And let's go back to Numbers 15, 38 and 9. Numbers 15, 38 and 39. I got it here. Speak to the children of Yasharel. You shall say to them to make tzitzit on the corners of your garment throughout their generations, and to put a blue cord in the tzitzit of the corners. And it shall be to you for a tzitzit, and you shall see it, and shall remember all the commands that Yahweh, and shall do them, and not search after your own heart and your own eyes, after which you went whoring, right? So that's this idea of putting the tzitzit. And I've been somewhat convicted I need to be doing that. I have a friend who's going to make me some, she said, and someday I'm going to receive them. So I don't know. Should we be wearing those in everyday life, or is it just for Shabbat? Is it just? I do think it is important that we would do that and keep that, because then, even if you had it, in your blue jeans on the, and it kind of went down into your pocket, you reach into your pocket to pull out some money to pay for something or whatever. then you remember the commands of Yahweh. You know, just I think it's an important act.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. You know, it's not for others to see that you are wearing tzitzit or tassels.
Right.
You know, you are a better person than others. It's for yourself to remind yourself about the laws.
Right. Yeah, it isn't for other people, right? And so that's the thing, right? So that's what Yahusha said to the Pharisees. They have their long flowing tzitzits. They're down, they're on the street corners, and everyone, oh, isn't that so cool? As if the longer the tzitzit was so much more important. They then were neglecting what Yah had set up for them because they wanted other people to see how righteous they were instead of, oh, I need to be keeping the commands, right? So, right, okay. Yeah, when you go out of your house, you keep your tzitzit under your garment. There you go. That's a good idea. So that, you know, and also the phylactery, right? That was the other thing that the Jews, for lack of a better word, would do. They would put that on the forehead because they were told to keep the 10 Commandments always in their mind. So they built this little box and they wear it on their forehead as if that's what Yah was saying. No, it's in your mind. Are you keeping them? Are you obeying them? You know, very important aspect. So, the next thing that I would bring up here is speaking about the proof of the girl's maidenhood, right? And that's kind of chapter or verses 13 and following. We aren't going to reread it all because there's quite a bit there, but the idea of the proof of the maidenhood basically was, let's call it a handkerchief or a kerchief of some sort that was used on the wedding night. And that was proof that she was a virgin because there would be blood on that kerchief. And that was given to the parents as proof that their daughter was a virgin when she got married. And so if they didn't have that proof, then how would they prove when they went to the elders of the city? See, and that also then gave the man marrying her, he knew that. And so he already knows, okay, wait a minute, I've married this woman and she was a virgin when we got married. And so part of that all lends to that. If we went back, once again, I didn't look up the passage. I didn't know we'd necessarily go down this way, but the priests were told they were only to marry the virgin. Other men were able to marry a non-virgin, let's say a divorced woman or whatever, in going back into Leviticus and stuff. But I found this interesting that, so here again is proof of what the marriage contract is. It is that beginning night. And so if you're going out and sleeping around, well, then how many wives do you actually have? And that's another thing that's mentioned in the book of Corinthians, is that how dare you go out and sleep around. I'm just going to use that as the aspect, because then you're saying that your relationship is Yahusha is the same as that. You're now bringing that into this contract with Yahusha, and we should not have that happen. And I'm sorry I didn't look that passage up either. But it's interesting when the woman then is found not to be a virgin, and yet, you know, all of this was supposed that she was a virgin. Then she was a whore in her father's house, and thus you shall purge the evil from your midst. When a man is found lying with a woman married to a husband, then both of them shall die, both the man that lay with the woman and the woman. Thus you shall purge the evil from Yasharel. So here we're seeing that they're supposed to slay these people. The virgin who wasn't a virgin when she got married, but claimed that, and also for the one a man sleeping with another woman. In other words, just straight up adultery. You had two people out having sex. Then when we get into verse 23 and on, the woman, when there's a girl or who is a maiden engaged to a husband, but she's found in the city, right? And you shall bring both of them to the gate and stone them to death with stones, because the girl did not cry out in the city. The man, because he has humbled his neighbor's wife. Thus you shall purge this evil from your midst. Now, again, this is another one of these debatable topics. I suppose you could say, well, he took hold of her, it says. Well, but she's in the city and she didn't cry out. So now it really lends itself to be that she was a willing participant in this act, right? So she's engaged to this man, but she goes out and lies with another man, right? Because the counter to that then is in verse 25. But if a man finds a girl who is engaged in the field, and the man seizes her and lies with her, then only the man who lay with her shall die. But you shall do no matter to the girl. The girl has no sin worthy of death, for the matter is like a man who rises against his neighbor and kills him. Because she couldn't stop what was going on. She didn't, we again, in the city, she could cry out. Out here, she's in the country, nobody could hear her screams, and so then that takes precedence. So then the final thing is when the man finds a girl who is a maiden, who is not engaged, he seizes her and lies with her. They are found out. Once again, she's a willing participant, the way this sounds to me. Then the man who lay with her shall give the girl's father 50 pieces of silver, and she is to be his wife, because he humbled her. He is not allowed to put her away all his days. A man does not take his father's wife or uncover his father's skirt. But so here in verse 29, okay, so he engaged in the marital act. Then all of a sudden, he can't put her away. He is bound to her forever, because he jumped the gun, so to speak. They didn't wait until they should have. And so, and of course, man should not take his father's wife nor uncover his father's skirt. In other words, you're not to go and sleep with those. And we know Yehuda did that with or I'm sorry, that's the wrong name. I said the wrong one. Anyway, so do you have anything else you want to add to this, Daniel, or anyone else for that matter?
I think we have read the about the sins and adultery, from John 8, 1 to verse 1 through 11. It says, but Jesus went down or Yahushua went down to the Mount of Olives. At dawn he appeared again in the temple courts, where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought up in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Yahushua, Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moshe commanded us to stone such woman. Now, what do you say? They were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. But Yahushua bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened it up and said to them, Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. Again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Yahushua was left with the woman still standing there. Yahushua straightened it up and asked her, Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? No one, sir, she said, but neither do I condemn you. Yahushua declared, Go now and leave your life of sin.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
yes, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So basically, I think just going down the rabbit hole, but we read. I think what we came across that when Yahushua was drawing, with his finger, and he might be drawing, the sins of the persons who were about to stone her. So that's why they left.
Right. Yeah, we don't know exactly, but yeah, what was he writing in the dirt, right? Was he writing their sins? Was he writing their names? What was he doing? I do think sin had something to do with it. He was calling them out for their sins.
Mm.
Kind of interesting. Oh,
But
you know that about me? I'm gonna leave. Oh, you know that about me? Oh, I'm gonna leave.
but up to the point that the chapter that where I read, they were dragging the woman
Right.
to be stoned, and what happened to the man?
To the man.
Yeah,
Right.
because
Exactly.
normally you need 2 or 3 witnesses, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Right.
That's
Right.
only like, one person is accusing you, and I don't
Mhm.
think that's enough. Even does it apply in courts? Nowadays
Right.
courts, that word and word. And of course, you always need
Right.
witnesses to make the case.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, that's all I had to say about that.
Okay. Chapter 23 then. One of wounded, mutilated, or genitalia cut off does not enter the assembly of Yahweh. One of incestuous birth does not enter the assembly of Yahweh. Even a 10th generation of his does not enter the assembly of Yahweh. An Ammonite, a Moabite, does not enter the assembly of Yahweh. Even a 10th generation of them does not ever enter the assembly of Yahweh, because they did not meet you with bread and water on the way when you came out of Mitzrayim, and because they hired against you Bilam, son of Beor, from Pithor of Aram Naharaim, to curse you. But Yahweh your Elohim refused to listen to Bilam, and Yahweh your Elohim turned the curse into a baraka for you, but that's a blessing. Because Yahweh your Elohim loves you. Do not seek their peace, nor their good, all the days forever. Do not loathe the Edomite, for he is your brother. Do not loathe the Mitzrite, because you were a stranger in his land. The children of the 3rd generation born to them do not enter the assembly of Yahweh. When the army goes out against your enemies, then you shall guard yourself from every evil matter. When there is any man among you who is not clean because of an emission in the night, then he shall go outside the camp. Let him not come into the midst of the camp. And it shall be toward evening that he bathes with water. And when the sun goes, let him come into the midst of the camp. And you shall have a place outside the camp where you shall go out, and you shall have a sharp implement among your equipment. And when you sit down outside, you shall dig it and turn it over your excrement. For Yahweh your Elohim walks in the midst of your camp to deliver you and to give your enemies over to you. Therefore your camp shall be Kodesh, so that he does not see unclean matter among you, and shall turn away from you. Do not hand over to his master the slave who has escaped from his master to you. Let him dwell with you in your midst, in the place which he chooses within one of your gates, where it is pleasing to him. Do not oppress him. None of the daughters of Yisrael is to be a cult prostitute, nor any of the sons of Yisrael be a cult prostitute. Do not bring the hire of a whore, or the pay of a dog into the house of Yahweh, your Elohim, for any vowed offering. For both of these are an abomination to Yahweh. Do not lend at interest to your brother, interest of silver, interest of food, or interest of whatever is lent at interest. To a foreigner, you lend at interest, but to your brother, do not lend at interest, so that Yahweh, your Elohim, might barak you in all that you put your hand to in the land which you are entering to possess. When you make a vow to Yahweh, your Elohim, do not delay to pay it, for Yahweh, your Elohim, is certainly requiring it of you, and it shall be sin in you. But when you abstain from vowing, it is not sin in you. That which is gone from your lips, you shall guard, and do for you voluntary vowed to Yahweh, your Elohim, what you have promised with your mouth. When you come into your neighbor's vineyard, you shall eat to the satisfaction of your desire, but do not put any into a receptacle of yours. When you come into your neighbor's standing grain, you shall pluck the heads of in your hand, but do not use a sickle on your neighbor's standing grain. Wow. So once again, there's this passage is giving us understanding on how we're to not only handle ourselves, but also, how we're to handle others. First of all, the fact that no one who is mutilated or genitalia cut off does not enter into the assembly of Yahweh. Now that's interesting, because there's a passage, I believe it's in the book of Isaiah, that says that the eunuch would actually be able to enter in, right? And so here it's the incestuous birth does not enter into the assembly. Even a 10th generation does not enter into the assembly, right? And then in verse 3, the Ammonite or the Moabite does not enter into the assembly of Yahweh. Even a 10th generation of them does not ever enter into the assembly of Yahweh. To me, this is very interesting, and I don't have the answer. I'm just going to throw it out there, because the Moabite comes from an incestuous relationship, right? Lot leaves, his two daughters lie with him, and one has Moab, who is a Moabitess, and then we have Ruth, who is a Moabitess, and through the lineage of Ruth, it's in the lineage of the Messiah. Wow. I just sometimes I can't wrap my head around how some of these things actually work out. And maybe there's something in here that we don't understand. That's quite possible, because sometimes what is written down maybe doesn't exactly play out the way that it is. There are many who can attest to the fact that, well, maybe this word doesn't mean exactly what we're given in the English. So, and of course, verse 4, it does say that the Moabites and the Ammonites didn't come out to meet them on the way. But then I find it very interesting, speaking about Mitzrayim, it says that we're not to have a hard heart against them, basically. Do not loathe the Edomite, for he is your brother. Do not loathe the Mitzrayite, because you were a stranger in his land, right? The children of the third generation born to them do not enter the assembly of Yahweh. Now, think of that, because realistically, Mitzrayim or Egypt represents bondage, right? And so that's really, Yahusha came to free us from the bondage and to nail the curse of the Torah to the cross, right? It's the curse. Well, if we got to it in Galatians, that's the passage that we would read in today's Brit Hadasha part of the Torah portion, that the curse is done away with. He did away with that curse. He came to release us from the bondage of the world of Mitzrayim. So And here it says not to loathe them, right? Don't loathe the Edomite or the Mitzrayim. Well, realistically, then when we put that into the proper context, and it's sometimes we can get caught up, oh, well, we loathe the people of the world instead of the circumstances that the world is in. And we're not to loathe other people, right? Because they're all created in the image of Yahweh. We are not to put that into our head, oh, well, that person is this or that. And I'll be honest, I struggle with that. Maybe it's jealousy, but I have a hard time with men with long hair. And I really have a hard time with anybody that's covered in tattoos and strange piercings and all that kind of stuff. I mean, those things bother me. But I'm trying to work my way through it. So these are your creation, Abba. So help me to accept them where they are, right? Just like it tells us in Acts 15. Once the people accepted Yahusha and they were given the letter not to eat blood and abstain from sexual immorality and the like, then they would go to the synagogue and hear Moses read. Hear the 5 books of the Pentateuch read aloud every week. This reading happens. Then Yah can bring them into covenant, because then they're going to start to understand the covenant, right? It doesn't mean that all that's done away with. It means, okay, wait a minute, we have a starting point. They now know who Yahushua is. They're going to now begin their journey towards being in covenant with him, right? And that's a journey. It is a journey to be in covenant with him. So, you have anything you want to add to this, or shall I keep going?
Just to go back to the about the legitimate child or eunuchs, if you want to read more. So what John brought up is the Isaiah 56 about those are excluded from the assembly. How are they going to be saved? If you want to read, you get more information from that Isaiah 56.
Okay, thank you. Yep. Then as we continue on here, we go kind of interestingly enough, verse 9 and on. It says, when the army goes out against you, your enemies, then you shall guard yourself against every evil manner. When there's anyone among you who is not clean because of an emission in the night, then he shall go outside the camp. Let him not come into the midst of the camp. And it shall be toward evening that he bathes with water, and when the sun goes down, let him come into the midst of the camp, right? So we're given this over and over again. Okay, so you're unclean, right? For whatever reason, whether it's an emission in the night or you touch something dead, and we've kind of touched on that several times here. So then you're to go outside the camp, right? You're to wash, and you're toward evening, and you're unclean until evening, right? So that lends itself to this, right? The mercy is new every day. So that the new day, when the day begins in the morning, all mercies are new. He cleanses us from all of that. To me, it's a beautiful picture, but also he separates that so that you're not mixing the clean and the unclean together, right? So you're not contaminating then the rest of the army. You set yourself aside and said, okay, well, this happened, I touched this, I did that, whatever it is. You go outside the camp so that you're not bringing that upon all in the camp, if that makes sense. And then it's very interesting that Yah tells them, hey, go outside, you dig a hole, you take care of yourself out there, you have a spot out there, and you cover that back up. Verse 14, for Yahweh your Elohim walks in the midst of your camp to deliver you and to give your enemies over to you. Therefore, your camp shall be Kodesh, right? Don't have that in the camp. This is outside of the camp, right? Just like when took the animal after the sacrifice, the hide and all of that. They took it outside of the camp. They took the Yahusha actually outside of the city and had him slain upon the hill. It's Therefore your camp shall be kodesh, so that he does not see any unclean matter among you, and shall turn away from you. Right? That's really the thing. How do we stand before Yahweh, who is perfect, who has no darkness in him? He is absolute light. And we are to stand before him pure. How do we do that? Right? Because we fail. We fail and we fail. We do the best that we can. And I'm not saying that we're all in that position of failure, but we do. It tells us, right? All have sinned and fall short of the glory of Yahweh. So how are we going to be made perfect before him? It's through the blood of Yahusha that covers a multitude of sin because of his love for us, right? And we don't want him to turn away because he finds uncleanliness into us. Years ago when I was in the Christian church, and as I guess I was probably working my way towards understanding this, one of the things that I heard people say quite often in the church that I was in anyway, it was we want to hear, well done, thy good and faithful servant. Well done, thy good and faithful servant. They would quote that passage all the time. And I said it to multiple people. You want to hear the words, well done, thy good and faithful servant, then you have to do something for him. You can't just sit idle and say, oh, I want to hear those words. Well, now that I'm in the Torah walk, I understand. You want to hear the words, well done, thy good and faithful servant? Keep the Shabbat, first and foremost. It tells us in the book of Jubilees that the weekly Shabbat is the highest of all the days, even higher than the Day of Atonement, right? It is more important than even the Day of Atonement. That's the weekly Shabbat. Then keep the feast days to the best of our ability, to the best of our understanding. Keep these. How do we go about some of these other things when we're speaking about the emission, whether that's a vomit or semen or whatever the emission is that makes you unclean? Then do we actually set ourselves aside and say, wait a minute, I'm unclean, and I'm going to take a shower this evening, and then I can come back in and be clean? Do we stop and think about that? Because once in a while I might touch a dead animal, because it happens in the farm world. You have to do that. I'm unclean now because I touched that animal, right? Or whatever the circumstance is. Do we do that and actually make a conscious effort then to cleanse ourselves, to wash, to mikvah, and come before him and say, okay, I was unclean and now I'm clean, right? That to me is also a picture of Yahusha washing the feet of the disciples, right? You're all clean except for your feet, right? Peter says, no, wash me all over. I'm filthy, right? No, you only need to have your feet washed, but there's one in here who's not clean, right? Which is Yehuda. So also, one of the other things I find very interesting is the fact that he says, hey, wait a minute. If a slave escapes and comes to you, don't give him back to his master. Let him dwell with you. Isn't that interesting? In the world of slavery, right? We're to actually make a place for one who escapes. And I get this picture in my mind. Okay, wait a minute. We need to be making a place for people who are escaping the world, coming out of whatever and coming into the Torah walk. We need to be making a place for them where they're at when they come in, and then have them grow. Because sometimes we end up putting a lot of stuff on them, and I still struggle with a lot of the Hebrew names. and part of me thinks that using a lot of that, the Hebrew in this culture we're in, then people just think, well, this is too hard. I can't get it. How am I supposed to come into this understanding? And they're so far ahead of me. Maybe we should be using more of the English to those who are English speaking. I'm not going to use, necessarily English to the Finnish speaking, but let's keep this maybe a little more simple for people, and even including me, because I struggle with it, but so that when people come into this and they escape from the world, that they have a place, and we give them some place to go. And the last thing that I would, well, I guess one of the other things is, do not bring the hire of a whore or the pay of a dog into the house of Yahweh, your Elohim, for any vowed offering, for both of these are an abomination to Yahweh, your Elohim. So you're going out, the pay of a dog, I knew what that was too, now I can't remember. But the hire of a whore, in other words, she's going out and then she's going to bring that in to cover her vow. And it's kind of like when I was listening to the debate the other night, and our wannabe president female, it's just so wrong that you have people of incest, and we should, and they shouldn't have to carry that. And realistically, to me, that's the same thing as saying, okay, so we're going to commit one sin to cover up another sin. And it's not right. And murder is definitely one of the 10 commandments. And what about the right of that child? What about that infant who's in the womb? It has no rights. It has no rights. What about the governor of Minnesota who says, no, of course she says that the other person was lying when there's nothing given to those who are taken to full term and then slaughtered. Well, what about the 8 children that, since he passed the law in Minnesota, that after the abortion, 8 of them so far were just left laying on a tray to die, because they can do that now. That is infanticide. When a child is alive after an abortion and they refuse to keep it alive, that's murder. Well, it's murder, I think, anyway. So with that, I'll be quiet, other than don't lend interest, add interest. So go ahead. You have anything you want to add, or anyone have anything they want to add to this? All right, then we'll go on to chapter 24. What are we doing for time? Okay. When a man takes a wife and shall marry her, then it shall be, if she finds no favor in his eyes, because he has found a matter of shamefulness in her, he shall write her a certificate of divorce and put it in her hand and send her out of his house, which lends itself to what we read in Matthew 5, right? It was given to them because of the hardness of heart, right? And if she left his house and went and became another man's wife, then the latter husband shall hate her and write her a certificate of divorce and put it in her hand and send her out of the house. Or when the latter husband dies, who took her to be his wife, the former husband who sent her away is not allowed to take her back to be his wife after she has been defiled. That would be an abomination before Yahweh. And do not bring sin in the land which Yahweh Elohim is giving you as an inheritance. Wow. When a man is given a new wife, let him not go out into the army, nor let any matter be imposed upon him. He shall be exempt 1 year for the sake of his home, to rejoice with his wife, whom he has taken. No one takes a pledge, the lower or the upper millstone, for he would be taking the life in the pledge. When a man is found kidnapping of his brothers of the children of Israel and treats him harshly or sells him, that kidnapper shall die. Thus you shall purge the evil from your midst. Take heed in the outbreak of leprosy to diligently guard. Do not and do according to all that the Kohanim and the Levites teach you. As I have commanded them, so you shall guard to do. Remember that while your Elam did to Miriam on the way when they came out of Mitzrayim. When you lend to your brother alone, do not go into his house to get his pledge. Stand outside and let the man whom you bring the pledge out to you. And if the man is poor, do not sleep with his pledge, but by all means return the pledge to him by sundown, and he shall sleep in his own garment, and it shall barak you, and it shall be righteousness to you before Yahweh your Elohim. Do not oppress the hired servant who is poor and needy of your brothers, or of the strangers who are in your land within your gates. Give him wages on the same day, and do not let the sun go down, for he is poor, and lifts up his being to it, so that he does not cry out against you, and it shall be sin for you. Fathers are not to put to death for their children, and children are not to put to death for their fathers. Each is to die on his own sin. Do not twist the right ruling of the stranger, the fatherless, nor take the garment of the widow. But you shall remember that you were a slave in Mitzrayim, and that Yahweh your Elohim redeemed you from there. Therefore, I am commanding you to do this word. When you reap your harvest of your field and have forgotten a sheaf in the field, do not go back and get it. Let it be for the stranger or for the fatherless and for the widow, so that Yahweh your Elohim barak you in all your work of your hands. When you beat the olive trees, do not examine the branch behind you. Let it be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, do not glean behind you. Let it be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow. And when you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Mitzrayim. Therefore, I am commanding you to do this word. Wow. So this is very interesting here. I don't know how much, where are we at for time? That verse 16, for instance, fathers are not put to death for their children, and the children are not put to death for their fathers, but each die of his own sin, right? Do not twist the right ruling of the stranger or the fatherless, nor take the garment of a widow. This is so important, right? We're not. Each one of us is accountable for our own sin. It's over and over again. I think it's in Sirach. I would have to go and look it up, but it says that that it could be second group, but that each one of us, we cannot lay the blame for Adam, right? Our sin is not Adam's fault. We can't say about, oh, we're living in a fallen world. How often do we hear that? And so it's just not right for us to think that we should blame others for our own sin. So anyway, what else is in this chapter here?
May I say something?
Yes, yes, please.
According to the chapter 24, it is what I understood. It says it is okay to divorce, but if we reread the Matthew 19, it is contrary. It says you can't divorce. If you divorce somebody and marry someone under, it is saying that you are committing adultery.
Right, right. That this is again that, but in Matthew 5 it says that it was given to us, right, because of the hardness of the heart. That's why it was given to the Levites or to the Israel. That because of the hardness of their heart, and we're held now at a higher level of accountability, right? However, I don't, there's only one sin that is unforgivable, right? Which is blasphemy against the Ruach. So how do we handle this sin then when we're presented with it? You know, if we went back and we look at David, he sees a woman out there on the roof of her house having a bath. He lusts after her. He brings her into his house, sleeps with her, gets her pregnant. Uriah, one of his dutiful servants in the army, comes home and he said, hey, go sleep with your wife. No. How dare I do that when the king is here? I'm going to sleep in the court. I'm going to sleep right outside his door. Not only then does he not go and sleep with his wife so that he would think that the child was his, but David sends him off to be murdered, right? Hey, you put Uriah on the front line and then everyone back away. He's going to fight and die. David then loses that child, but he repents wholeheartedly. And David did a lot of things that were, whatever you want to call it, sinful. But he had a heart, right? Because of his repentance. And that has to be our heart. It has to be the heart of repentance. Because we're all going to sin. How do we deal with these sins? That is the question. What about marriage? What about remarriage? Right? How do we work our way through that? Right? What about in the culture of the world that we have today? Right? I mean, my dad told me as a young man, if you're not in bed by midnight, you just as well come home. In other words, we were taught to go out and find women to sleep with. Right? What was that upbringing like? Then when I gave myself to Yahusha when I was 28 years old, to me, that took everything away because I didn't know him. I really didn't. I was born and raised in the Lutheran church, but didn't know. I mean, there's a sense of understanding, but where's our heart, right? Yeah, a contrite heart. That's exactly right. How do we have that contrite heart when we're before him, right? I think of the Pharisee and the tax collector. And Yahusha says to him, the Pharisee, I'm just thankful I'm not like this tax collector. And the tax collector says, too ashamed to even look up because he knew his sin. He knew his life. He said, I can't even look up because of who I am. Who's just that's the guy. That's the guy that I want. I want men who recognize for themselves that you are a sinner. Each one of us, we are, right? In 1 John, it tells us that he who says he is without sin is a liar and the truth is not in him. In Corinthians 13, verse 5, it says that we are to examine ourselves so that we know whether or not we are in the Messiah, unless we fail the test, right? Matthew 7. Many come before him saying, Master, we drove out demons in your name. We prophesied in your name. We did all these things in your name. And he says, away from me, I never knew you, you workers of iniquity, because they did all this stuff, but they weren't keeping Torah. They were iniquity. They were full of sin, and pride is the master of all sin. It wells up inside of us and takes us down a path that we shouldn't go. And so I say, because of the Matthew 7 passage, it's one thing to know the Messiah, and it's another thing to be known by him. And it's one thing to know Yahweh, and another thing to be known by him. And the only way that we can be in covenant with him is, once again, by keeping the Shabbat, keeping the feast days, living a clean life. Oh, I'd have to read that I didn't get it all read there. Can you read what Vanessa said, Daniel?
Yes. So Vanessa wrote a comment about, so putting someone away is not the same as divorce, or is he giving a man of taste of his own medicine?
Wow. Yeah, I can't answer that. I wish I could. I don't have the answer to that. So anyway.
So basically, it's just if you are sinless in your mind, then you are welcome to cast the first stone.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good way to put it, Daniel. Yeah, because we're not, you know. So, but moving on from that, I guess one of the other things, and you could go back in Leviticus 23, between the feasts, the early and the late feasts, it also says to not harvest at the edge of your field and to give that to the widows, the orphans and the sojourners. And that's one of the other things I think that is so important in here when we're reaping a harvest. And many of us are not in a agricultural community anymore because we're so distant from what Yah originally set up. Our world is really upside down. We should all be out here having our own plot of land, tilling our own soil, reaping our own harvest, right? And doing it according to God. Now, oh no, we've got farmers, they farm 10, 20, 30, 50,000 acres, 100,000 acres, right? It's not the same as what Yah really set up. The land was to be divided amongst the children of Yasharel, right? Each one according to the portion of the number of the children of the tribe, right? Now, we live in such a world that is not conducive to that, and that's sad because there's nothing. I really think that there should be dirt underneath your fingernails. We should have our own garden. We should be raising our own stuff to the best of our ability. We should have a little plot of land where we can raise our own wheat. We can raise our own grain. We can raise our own livestock to butcher, to eat, because that is, to me, is so important. That way we can keep our food clean to the best of our ability. And so I think it's so important here that when how do we do that? How do we set aside for the widows and the orphans in the world today? But Yah very clearly says not to harvest to the edge of our fields, not to go through the olive, not to gather the last of the grapes, right? And not to even say, oh, this guy's out here picking a grape. Oh, well, he can go ahead and eat what he has, his fill. Just don't fill up a pail. Right? Don't fill up a receptacle. Don't take anything that's not yours, but you're welcome to eat it because there's not that much there if you just fill your stomach, right? And Yahusha was doing the same thing when he grabbed the grain out on the field. Of course, it was a Sabbath day, and so you're harvesting. No, a harvest is when you put a sickle to it. If you're just plucking the grape, you can, on the Sabbath day, you can go out, you got a grapevine or an apple tree, you can go out and pick an apple and eat an apple. Just don't go out into your orchard and think, oh, well, I can load up all my bins to sell the next day. No, that's wrong. So anyway. Well, should we try to, what do we have? How many verses do we have well, we have all of chapter 25.
Hold on, please. Just about the pitching the poor, and I would like to read from my favorite gospel, Second Esdras, known as also Fourth Esdras. Second Esdras, chapter 2, verse 20 through 23. So God's rights of the widow, secure justice for the world, give to the needy, defend the orphan, clothe the naked, care for the injured and the weak. Do not ridicule the lame, protect the maimed, and let the blind have a vision of my splendor. Protect the old and the young within your walls. When you find any who are dead, commit them to grave and market, and I will give you the first place in my resurrection. So basically it just says, pity the poor and be generous.
Yes.
And if we read from the Proverbs 19, verse 17, whoever is generous to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will repay him for his deed. That's all I have to say about the chapter 24.
Okay. Yeah. I would agree. I think instead of reading chapter 25, can we read some of the Isaiah passage, and then we'll close in prayer.
Please go ahead.
Okay. So Isaiah 52:13 is where I'm going to start. My servant will act wisely. He will be raised and lifted up and greatly exalted, just as many were appalled at you. His appearance was so disfigured that he did not look like a man, and his form did not resemble a human being. So he will sprinkle many nations. Kings will shut their mouths because of him, for they will see that what had not been told of them, and they will understand what they have not heard. Chapter 53. Who has believed? What have we heard? And who has the arm of Yahweh been revealed to? He grew up before him like a young plant, like a root out of the dry ground. He did not have an impressive form or majesty that we should look at him, no appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of suffering who knew what sickness was. He was like someone people turned away from. He was despised, and we didn't value him. Yet he himself bore our sicknesses. He carried our pains. But we in turn regarded him stricken down by Yahweh, afflicted. But he was pierced because of our transgressions, crushed because of our iniquity, punished for our own peace was on him. And we were healed by his wounds. We all went astray like sheep. We all turned to our own way. And Yahweh has punished him for the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. Like a lamb led to slaughter, like a sheep silent before the shearers, he did not open his mouth. He was taken away because of oppression and judgment. Who considered him fate? For he was cut off from the land of the living. He was struck because of my people's rebellion. They made his grave with the wicked and with a rich man at his death, although he had done no violence and had not spoken deceitfully. Yet Yahweh was pleased to crush him severely. When you make him a restitution offering, when you make him a restitution offering, he will see his seed. He will prolong his days, and by his hand Yahweh's pleasure will be accomplished. He will see it out of his anguish, and he will be satisfied with his knowledge. My righteous servant will justify many. He will carry their iniquities. Therefore, I will give him the many as his portion, and he will receive the mighty as spoil. Because he submitted himself to death among the rebels, yet he bore the sin of many and interceded for the rebels. Rejoice, children. Rejoice, childless one who did not give birth. Burst into song and shout, you who have been in labor. For the children of the forsaken will be more than the children of the married woman, says Yahweh. Enlarge the sight of your tent, and let your tent curtains be stretched out. Do not hold back. Lengthen your robes and drive your pegs deep, for you will spread out in the right and the left, and your descendants will dispossess nations and inhabit the desolate cities. Do not be afraid, for you will not be put to shame. Don't be humiliated, for you will not be disgraced. For you will forget the shame of your youth, and you will no longer remember the disgrace of your widowhood. Indeed, your husband is your maker. His name is Yahweh of hosts. The Holy One of Yasharel is your Redeemer. He is called El Hayim of all the earth, for Yahweh has called you like a wife deserted and wounded in spirit, a wife of one's youth, when she is rejected, says Yer El Hayim. I deserted you for a brief moment. I will take you back with great compassion. In a surge of anger, I hid my face from you. In a moment, I will have compassion on you. With everlasting love, says Yahweh, your Redeemer. For this is like the days of Noah to me, when I swore the waters of Noah would never flood the earth again. So I have sworn I will not be angry with you or rebuke you. Though the mountains move and the hills shake, my love will not be removed from you. My covenant of peace will not be shaken, says your compassionate Yahweh. Let us pray. Dear Father, we do come before you. Abba, you are our Redeemer. You are so powerful. You are so powerful to save. The righteous run into you and are saved. And I pray that you would lead and direct and guide each one of us to seek you, to humbly come before you, to know who we are in this massive environment that you have made for us. And not just the earth, but all of this. And that throughout all of your creation, you looked down upon us and said, oh, I'm going to make mankind the pinnacle of my creation. I'm going to make him after my own image. Imagine that. I'm going to give him the breath of life called the Ruach. And I pray that you would help us to breathe in and to breathe out your word in every effort, and that you would help us always to be doers of the word and not hearers only. Help us to apply whatever truth you have brought before us, and that we live to the best of our ability before you, that someday we will hear the words, well done, thy good and faithful servant. It's in the name of Yahushua HaMashiach that I pray. Amen and amen. And Shabbat Shalom.
Yes, Shabbat Shalom. It's been really a
Shabbat
blessing.
Shalom.
If Yah's willing,
Shabbat
we will
Shalom.
see you next Shabbat. Okay, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you,
Shabbat
John.
Shalom.
Thank you. Thank